Yo, I think I found the optimal way to learn in school. And I'm not even trolling. This advice has never ever been seen on the internet before. No other study YouTuber has ever talked about this. This might be the true sauce, bro. So how did I actually find this? So first of all, I already knew how bad the education system was starting off. I already did all the research before. And then for the past few weeks, I've been doing specific research on the learning science, how our brain actually learns. And by the way, literally no other study YouTuber other than insane high level learning coaches do this research. So I might actually be better than 99% already, okay? And what I realized through all this research is that learning should actually be natural. We should actually be naturally good at learning. It makes sense, right? If we were not good at learning, we would die as a species. If we weren't able to learn in the wild immediately from immediate feedback, if we weren't able to learn how to survive, we would just die, right? So our brain should naturally stick on to information just very easily, or else we would just die as species. However, there's also too much information that we get. So that's why forgetting happens, right? That's our brain dumping all the information that we don't need. So I was trying to discover why some information sticks in our brain and stays there while some information doesn't and we forget it. And what I realized is, actually, I'm gonna just spill the terms, I'm not gonna explain it. It's caused from deep processing, but essentially, our brain learns much more efficiently, and this will make complete sense when I say it. When we're curious, right? When we're curious, when we are actually genuinely interested in the stuff that we're learning, of course it'll stick in our brain. And curiosity automatically triggers stuff like deep processing by default. Like, deep processing is pretty much asking deeper and deeper questions, questioning your knowledge at a very deep level to the point where you're processing in your brain, making insane amount of connections in your brain. That's how information sticks. And curiosity spikes this process automatically. And the moment I realized this, my brain just clicked and I just snapped and I realized, holy fuck, the education system is designed to ruin our curiosity. It's designed to make us obedient, right? And obedient people are never curious. Obedient people never experiment with their own knowledge, they never question anything. They're just doing as they're told. And curiosity is one of the aspects of everyone that are stamped out of us in the education system. Think about it. Do you remember children? All of them are so curious about everything. You bring a 5-year-old, actually not even that, maybe a 3-year-old outside, and they'd be looking at everything. They're whatever, bro, they're actually tweaking outside, right? Because everything to them was so interesting. They were so curious by default. And now look at the average person today. What has happened? It's the education system, bro. The education system has stamped out our ability to be curious. So that leads me to my first point. There are two types of curiosity. The first one is called motivational curiosity or intrinsic curiosity. You probably already understand this. Pretty much the things that we are intrinsically curious about. I don't know if you have any more, and that's actually a sad point to make, but there are natural things that we are naturally curious about. Even though they're probably bad habits right now for you, these things we naturally want to learn insane amounts about, right? You don't need people to tell you to learn about things that you're intrinsically like. And a side point, actually, if people actually told you to learn about the things you liked, it'd actually be even worse, right? Now, the second type of curiosity, I found the most broken method on the entire internet. And I'm not even trolling. This curiosity is called information gap curiosity. So what the hell is that? So let me tell you about the information gap theory. That is pretty much the theory where if you recognize a gap of information in your brain, meaning that you recognize that you don't know something, your brain has dopamine responses in anticipation of that knowledge being filled. So pretty much if you create if you have or create knowledge gaps in your brain automatically releases dopamine to try and solve those knowledge gaps, right? So information gap curiosity is where you forcefully create information gaps out of nowhere, and that actually spikes your motivation. So let's compare it to pretty much intrinsic curiosity. You already had the motivation all along. Before the question, before the answer, you always had the motivation. However, for information gap curiosity, motivation is not required. You actually create the motivation when you ask the problem. From between the problem and the solution, you have the motivation, but you need the discipline to ask the problem yourselves. So putting this all together, my study strategy or my learning strategy or whatever that no one else ever talks about online is called disciplined curiosity, where you discipline yourself to ask deeper questions which spike our motivation response to solve those questions. And essentially you're training your brain to ask deeper questions, which is exactly how learning occurs in your brain. It's called deep processing if you want to search it up. You don't really need to know it. Maybe I'll explain it in another video. So you must realize that curiosity is a skill. The skill of curiosity is stamped out of all of us in the education system. From the moment we stepped into the education system, we were starting to be brainwashed. And I'm not even trolling by this. The education system is not good, by the way. Like, it's actually very bad. And what I'm essentially doing is reversing the damage. I don't know if I just said that before, but how do we actually go about leveling up our skill of curiosity? Before I said, like, ask deeper questions, but that doesn't really make sense, right? Okay, first of all, this habit needs to become automatic. You first need to start rewording everything. So essentially, whatever you just learned in this video, try to reword it in your own brain. Like, just use your own words to describe whatever I just said. And I know you're probably not going to do it, but whatever. Pause it right now and just do it, okay? And most of the time, if you start having this habit of doing this whenever you learn anything, during class or outside, like, it's actually sad that we associate learning as in school. But anyways, if you start rewording everything, you start to realize that, wait, I don't actually understand what the hell the guy was talking about. So that's the first part of leveling up your skill of curiosity. It's actually to understand that, first of all, you're not actually absorbing anything. This habit needs to become you need to do this habit so much that it becomes automatic. And I'll talk about that in my next point. But essentially, every single time you learn something, just please get to the habit of rewording everything. Making sure, and this essentially just makes sure you actually understand it. And this, honestly, it's literally an instant way to remember everything you learn, by the way. And now, once you start doing this habit, over time, you actually become better at it. Like, it's called neuroplasticity, but you pretty much just get better at anything you constantly do over and over again, which completely makes sense, right? So once you get better at this, you then start shifting over to this thing called the Feynman technique. You probably already heard of that from all the other study YouTubers. They always talk about this, but they never talk about doing it during class, right? So obviously, when I said rewording, I didn't mean like actually saying it out loud. No, you can just say it in your brain, right? For example, let me just reword the skill of curiosity in my own words. The skill of curiosity is pretty much rewiring your brain to think at a deeper level and to ask deeper questions so that it not only sticks in your brain, but you're actually igniting motivation out of nowhere, right? That's proof that I actually understand this concept. And now, how I apply, if I get really good at rewording, now I'm starting to apply the Feynman technique. So Feynman technique is pretty much keep asking why, keep simplifying every single part. So imagine if you're talking to a 5-year-old, what parts would they not understand? And explain those parts. So for example, maybe someone, I guess that explanation was pretty simple, but maybe someone doesn't understand what curiosity is. So curiosity is pretty much your desire to learn more, your desire to understand something deeper. And now, these two techniques alone will get you past so much. If you just apply these two techniques, rewording and then Feynman technique, your brain will rewire itself to be so much more curious than 99% of students, because you're actually learning. Like, this is how learning actually occurs, bro. It's not in study techniques. Study techniques don't do anything when it comes to learning. Bro, like, the best advice that study YouTubers actually talk about is literally pay attention in class. But that's so broad. Like, what the fuck is pay attention in class, bro? Of course I'm paying attention in class. I mean, well, 99% of people are not, but anyways. And now, final point I want to make is, you might think it's hard, but that's the entire point. Imagine your brain as a muscle and the skill of curiosity as a specific muscle in your brain. Every single time you ask why, every single time you reword something and actually question your own knowledge, question what you actually learned. You're rewiring your brain to think at a deeper level. This is how learning actually works. And you're strengthening that specific muscle in your brain to fire faster, fire stronger. Just try it and trust me, you will literally learn more in that specific class that you've actually questioned the knowledge in than 99% of other classes. Okay, the final point I actually want to make, I'm not going to make this too long. Pretty much, this idea is called Automacity. So I was already talking about this thing called neuroplasticity. Sorry, I'm overwhelming you, but I'll explain it all. Pretty much, neuroplasticity is pretty much your brain rewiring itself to strengthen and weaken specific neurons, but essentially it just rewires itself to make things easier. And Automacity is pretty much the process at which your brain rewires itself to make things automatic. So this is pretty much the same thing as building habits. Whenever you have the habit of, for example, like reaching for your phone while you study, that habit has become so automatic, you don't need to think about it anymore. Actually, that's kind of a negative habit. Let's talk about walking. You don't need to think about putting your feet on the ground, right? However, when you were learning to walk, you did. And when you were learning to walk, it was so difficult because you had to think about every single micro process, every single micro muscle in your foot that had to be activated until it was placed on the floor. And then now you have to think about the other foot, right? Well, over time, you learn these all automatically to the point where you don't need to think anymore, right? So this is the process of Automacity. It's when your brain makes things automatic to the point where you're literally automatically executing things that used to be difficult, right? So if you think that there's no point to train your skill of curiosity, first of all, you just become automatically smarter. What I mean by this is over time, you question every single thing, which means that every single thing you process the information at a deeper level, deeper processing, which means every single piece of knowledge you retain longer. Your marks will skyrocket. You will actually become naturally smart, just as I have. By the way, this entire process, I'm not like making it all up. This is the process that I went through. For like 5-6 months, I questioned everything. I trained my skill of curiosity, and I think I didn't realize it at the time. So if you actually take these fundamentals and apply it in your own life, you can probably make even faster progress. And what I mean by like 5-6 months, now I don't need to do homework anymore. I learn things so quickly to the point where homework, there's no benefit for me doing it anymore. I learn things so quickly that, you know that feeling when you know that you're kind of cooked for a class, right? I don't have that feeling. Like, I barely have that feeling anymore. I used to do homework every single time I had that feeling where I've actually like screwed for a class, right? Now there's no point of doing homework because I just understand everything. I know exactly how the lesson's going to be tested on the test. I know exactly my level of understanding because I'm naturally curious. I level up my skill of curiosity to the point where I just learn things at a deeper level automatically. I am naturally smart. I train my brain to become a genius by rewiring my brain to level up my skill of curiosity. Okay, by the way, the final point where I want to make, I know it's kind of long, but pretty much what I realized through all this is I'm actually undoing the damage of the education system. Pretty much, the education system was never designed for learning in the first place, actually. You can look into history of it and it's actually insane. But it was always designed to make people obedient and never question everything, right? Essentially, what I'm doing when I'm testing and training our skills of curiosity, I'm actually rewiring our brain back to normal. It's actually a rehabilitation technique. I'm actually making us how we used to be. And at a certain point, when you train your skill of curiosity, you eventually start. Oh, and by the way, over time, sadly enough, our intrinsic curiosity activities, pretty much the things that we intrinsically were curious about, they disappear because our skill of curiosity has atrophied. And essentially, what this technique does is it rewires your brain, levels up your curiosity to the point where you actually start experiencing things that you're intrinsically curious about. You pretty much have hobbies now. You have like life again, right? You stop becoming an obedient person and actually start questioning things, actually living your life, becoming an independent person, which is absolutely insane what I'm doing here. This is the golden technique that no one else talks about online. If you watched all the way here, bro, just join my Discord server. I hold some weekly calls. If you want to join those, that'll be nice. All right, see ya.